Love it when we get viewer questions. Here is one from Vith VJ. With the Montreal Canadiens' inconsistent play and the lack of scoring, do you think Dominique Ducharme stays on as head coach after this season?
Well, if you take in consideration the win-loss, which is, the major judgment for any coach in the NHL, to me, the biggest concern in Montreal is having a bilingual coach. And obviously, I think it'd be a little premature to say that Mr. Ducharme, Dominique, gets cut loose after, his first year at the helm. I think that there's a lot of things that obviously are going to come into play. Who his boss will continue to be if that happens to be the case. But I think that he's a guy that they're going to maybe cut a little more slack to see just how well he can fare. And then, as we all know in the business, it doesn't take long before a decision is made midstream, or however they handle his situation, it can be adjusted pretty quickly.
Yeah, if the Canadiens somehow miss the playoffs, I don't think there's any chance Dominique Ducharme comes back as head coach next season. If they lose in the first round of the playoffs, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. If they don't make the playoffs, you got to wonder if Marc Bergevin even comes back. And then the decision on the next coach will be up to the next GM. But let's say they do get in the playoffs and they win the first round, they lose the first round, whatever. I think in the exit meetings with the players, I think the leaders will be asked about Ducharme. And do you think that, he's the guy, that we should go forward with? And I think that will go a long way in determining whether he continues to coach with the Canadiens. If things really fall apart and he's not back, it could be a similar situation to Randy Cunningworth, minus the language issue, where, Randy Cunningworth, a great American Hockey League coach, did really well with the Habs farm team, got called up, didn't go well, and he basically fell off the face of the earth. Like, where's Randy Cunningworth today? And I fear that could happen with Dominique Ducharme if the wheels continue to fall off this Canadiens team going forward. So, the play the rest of the way is going to determine his future. But right now, it's not looking very good, considering their record under him has been worse than what it was under Claude Julien.
I don't know. I kind of agree with Rick because of the language issue that Dominique Ducharme might have a little bit more rope. Also to say we're in a pandemic at the moment. It's not a regular NHL season when he was thrown in. So those reasons could give him a little bit more time to prove himself as the head coach for this team. But especially with the Canadiens a few years ago when they hired him and Joël Bouchard, they realized that they had to start developing their own coaches because the unique circumstance that they're in, that it has to be a coach that speaks English and French. But I think it's going to fall more towards Marc Bergevin, that the finger has to be pointed at someone if the Canadiens do miss the playoffs. And I think this time it's not going to be the coach who's going to be blamed. This time it'll have to be the general manager. And then we'll have to wait and see who takes over that job and what their plan is. But I just don't think that Dominique Ducharme's time as head coach of the Montreal Canadiens will be over just yet. When
Bergevin hired Ducharme as an assistant coach, he was hired as the head coach in waiting. He was there so that if things didn't work with Claude Julien, Bergevin didn't have to look far to find his next coach, and Joel Bouchard's the next in line, and you wonder if Joel Bouchard might be the next in line for Marc Bergevin's job also, since the GM also has to be bilingual. And there's not a lot of candidates. There's more coaching candidates out there who are bilingual than there are GM candidates. So Jeff Molson's going to have some decisions to make at the end of this season regarding his GM and his coach, depending on how the rest of this season plays out.
There's also Matthew Darche down in Tampa that maybe could, if he wants to relocate back to the snow, could be a potential candidate. But yeah, you're right, Stu. There's not that many GMs out there that are bilingual.
Yeah, Darche would be at the top of my list. He might have to convince his wife, though, and his kids to want to leave Tampa and come back to
Yeah, considering the organization as well. My whole thing on Joël Bouchard and Dominique Ducharme is this. I mean, I don't know anything. This is more just a theory, but Joël Bouchard's been doing really well as the AHL bench boss for this organization, especially with this season. I understand with the divisions that they're in and the level of the teams that may play a role in it, but he's done really well. And if it gets to a point where, maybe some NHL team or a few, for whatever reason, start to kind of call around and see if Joël Bouchard has some interest, maybe that also plays into Jeff Molson saying, hey, we got to find a way to keep Joël Bouchard in the organization. If it means having him supplant Dominique Ducharme as the head coach, I'm not sure the Montreal Canadiens necessarily hesitate at that. He's a guy who's done well with some of the younger players on this team. Jake Evans, I'm sure, could speak some praises to Joël Bouchard, for example. I don't know. I think the bilingualism thing here, as we could go all day on that particular issue with the Montreal Canadiens and some of the staff positions on this team. I understand it's a factor for some of the hiring decisions that have to be made, but I don't necessarily think that could be a positive that keeps Dominique Ducharme. I think it kind of just works both ways here. Maybe it could help him, but I don't think the Canadiens are short on guys who could necessarily fill his place. They have a guy in waiting in the American Hockey League who can fill that space. So I guess we got to be careful with that.
And the bilingual thing's not going to go away. Jeff Molson's made it clear his GM and his head coach have to be bilingual. So that's, as I said, that limits the candidates that are out there. And those are like Joel Bouchard is one of the guys obviously at the top of the list.
And you want to establish some kind of stability. I mean, you get into a situation like they have in Calgary where guys are fired each year, and this is not the scenario that you'd like to have. You want to it is the Montreal Canadiens. You want to establish some stability in the people that are in charge. That comes from the top. It will be, remains to be seen, what happens as this plays out as far as who still has a job and, who's getting hired and who's getting fired. But right now it's going to be an interesting stretch. And, obviously there's going to be changes if we don't see anything more positive happening.
And would Jeff Molson let Marc Bergevin hire a fourth head coach? Don't forget, Jeff Molson's still paying Coach Julian $5 million next year, not the coach. So how many coaches can a GM go through before the GM's the guy who goes?
In a pandemic, too. Throwing out some money in a pandemic. Is Dominique Ducharme going to have the interim tag taken off of him for next season? Is Joël Bouchard the replacement in waiting? Is it somebody else? Let us know in the comments section below and visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out our full episode.